up, man fans? I'm your host, Josh Black, and this is the Week 7 Draftkings Fantasy Locks. Follow me on Instagram and Twitter at ManFansFF, or over on Facebook at ManFansFootball. Make sure you check out the Week 7 Draftkings Fantasy Preview. That's my audio podcast. It drops every Friday, absolutely free to download and available on all major platforms. All you gotta do is search ManFansFootball. Week 6 is in the books, so let's pop the top on these Week 7 lineups. I'm going to give you one player at every position that I think can hit 3 times cost per point. So without further ado, let's get down to business.
Arizona Cardinals quarterback Kyler Murray. He's at home against Seattle, and Arizona's a 3-point dog. DraftKings has him priced at $7,100, and Pro Football Focus has him projected for 21.6 fantasy points. Murray rolls into Week 7 as QB2 in fantasy scoring. Dude's exceeded 3 times cost per point in every game this season. Last time out against Dallas, Kyler got off to a slow start and ended up with only 9 total completions the entire game. But he threw for 188 yards, 2 touchdowns, and no picks. Plus, he rushed for 74 more and another score. This week, Kyler faces off against a Seattle defense that surrenders the most fantasy points per game to opposing quarterbacks. The Seahawks allow an average of 376 yards per game passing. That's the most in the league. And last time out, they got ran over by the Vikings, and that bodes well for Murray's already sky-high rushing floor. Dude leads all quarterbacks with 370 rushing yards and 6 rushing touchdowns. Earlier, I mentioned Kyler's QB2 in fantasy scoring, but what I didn't tell you is that he's only thrown for 300 plus passing yards 1 time this season. And I like him to do it again this week. Here's a bold prediction. I think Murray hits both bonuses in Week 7. 300 plus through the air, 100 plus on the ground, and a 2 touchdown minimum. If you're playing cash games, you're playing Kyler Murray. Next man up, Green Bay Packers running back Aaron Jones. Green Bay's at Houston and a 3-point favorite. Jones is priced at $7,200 and projected for 19.2 fantasy points. The Packers lead back comes into this week as RB4 in fantasy scoring. Jones is a top 10 running back in terms of rushing and receiving yards. Not to mention, he scored 7 touchdowns. Last week, he underwhelmed with 13 fantasy points. But that's to be expected against Tampa Bay. They're the best run D in the NFL. This week, it's the polar opposite. Aaron Jones draws a Houston defense that ranks 27th against opposing running backs. They allow 5.4 yards per carry and 177 yards per game rushing. That's the worst in the league. Derrick Henry exposed the Texans last week. 212 yards rushing, 52 yards receiving, and a pair of touchdowns. So I like Jones to pick up where he left off. And that's good news for the Packers. Their offense looked out of sync last week. Aaron Rodgers was under a ton of pressure and Green Bay got blown out. I expect the Packers to come out and establish the run against Houston. So giddy up Aaron Jones. Let's call it 100 plus rushing yards, 3 or 4 catches, and a touchdown. You can lock him in. Let's keep it moving with Washington wide receiver Terry McLaurin. At home against Dallas, Washington's a 1-point underdog. DraftKings has him priced at $5,800 and Pro Football Focus has him projected for 16 fantasy points. And hats off to this guy. He's been through 3 quarterbacks in 6 weeks, only has 1 touchdown, and still he's putting up wide receiver 1 numbers. Last time out against the Giants, McLaurin showed a nice rapport with quarterback Kyle Allen, commanding 12 targets, catching 7 passes for 74 yards. This week, he gets the super juicy matchup against Dallas. They allow the 2nd most fantasy points per game to opposing wide receivers. The Cowboys are bottom 5 in the NFL, allowing 12.3 yards per reception and 14 total receiving touchdowns. Last week, Arizona showed what a little speed can do to this secondary. Kyler Murray hooked up with Christian Kirk on a go route, 80 yards to the house. Now insert Scary Terry. Dude can fly. He's got sub 4.4 speed, and his hands are no joke. He'll see primary coverage from cornerback Darryl Worley. Dude's giving up catches at an 83% rate, and Pro Football Focus has that graded as a 30% advantage for McLaurin. So you already know what it is. I'm down to ride with F1. I like McLaurin for 7 or 8 catches, around 100 receiving yards, and a touchdown. I think this Washington stack has legit GPP winning upside this week. Let's move over to tight end and talk about Cleveland Browns' Austin Hooper. Cleveland's at Cincinnati and a 3-point favorite. Draftkings has him priced at $4,000 and Pro Football Focus has him projected for 9.8 fantasy points. Over the last 3 weeks, Hooper's tight end 6 in fantasy scoring, averaging 5 catches and 12 fantasy points per game. Last week, it was a brutal matchup against Pittsburgh, but Hooper still produced. This week, he'll see a Bengals defense that ranks 26th against opposing tight ends. They've given up tight end production in every game over the last month. Last week in particular, the Colts tight ends combined for 7 catches, 88 yards, and 3 total touchdowns. And in my opinion, Hooper's a significantly better pass catcher than Trey Burton or Jack Doyle. Get this, backup tight end David Njoku is demanding a trade. So expect Hooper to have an every down role this week. Let's call it 6 catches, 60 yards, and a 50-50 shot of a score. Austin Hooper's a fantastic value play this week. Let's round out the Week 7 locks with the Washington football team defense. They're at home against Dallas and a 1-point underdog. DK's got him priced at $2,500 and projected for 2.4 fantasy points. Who would have thought 2 weeks ago, start Washington's defense against the Cowboys? But that's what it is. They're top 10 in the NFL in sacks, interceptions, and yards per game allowed passing. This week, they'll see a Dallas offense that ranks 21st against opposing defenses. Last week, they looked suspect against Arizona. The Cardinals' defense had 3 sacks, 2 fumble recoveries, and 2 interceptions. Look for Washington's defense to bring the pressure early and often this week. They're converting 18% of their QB pressures into sacks, and that's bad news for Andy Dalton. I like Washington for 3 sacks, 2 picks, and I think they hold Dallas under 21 total points. They're a rock-solid play at $2,500.
And that's a wrap on the Week 7 DraftKings Fantasy Preview. If you're loving the show, hook us up. Like, subscribe, hit the notification bell. We're trying to get to 1,000 followers on YouTube, so if you could share the show with your friends, we would much appreciate it. Don't forget to check out the Week 7 DraftKings Fantasy Preview. That's my audio podcast. It's dropping out Friday. We're going to hook you up with all the best plays on Sunday's main slate, so don't forget to check that out. Good luck this week. I hope you guys see some green screens, and I'll catch you on the flip side.